Demon AI. Demon AI.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're looking at something really quite thought-provoking. It's a short online reflection posted by Pastor Jamin Bradley back in April 2021, and it's all centered around Maundy Thursday.
Right, the Last Supper commemoration.
Exactly. And what grabbed me straight away is this core tension Bradley explores. It's this contrast, between ancient gods who, well, supposedly needed people.
Needed humanity to function, essentially.
And then the Christian idea of God, who Bradley argues needs absolutely nothing from us, it just seemed like a surprising take on a day many people are familiar with.
It is a different angle.
So our goal today is really to unpack Bradley's perspective. What's his unique take on Maundy Thursday's significance? And I guess, what does that tell us, or tell you, the listener, about the nature of the Christian God he's describing?
Well, it's definitely a fascinating place to start, his description of these ancient gods. He presents them as fundamentally dependent.
Dependent? How so?
His point is that in a lot of these old belief systems, humans were basically created to serve the god's needs, to provide things.
Like what kind of things?
Food, drink, even clothing and housing, according to Bradley. So it wasn't exactly a relationship built on, say, pure divine affection. It had a purpose for the gods.
Right. He frames it almost like a deal, doesn't he? He uses that phrase, symbiotic, Stockholm syndrome, which is pretty strong.
It is strong language. It suggests, the gods offered some care, maybe protection.
That there's a catch.
Exactly. But that care was conditional. It depended on humans holding up their end, providing the goods. So there's this sort of implied threat lurking underneath if you don't provide.
The protection might disappear, yeah.
So it creates this dynamic where, as Bradley puts it, we're here for them. Humanity's job is fulfilling the God's requirement.
It really makes you think, though, doesn't it? What kind of power is it if it needs constant upkeep from its creations?
Precisely. And that's the setup for the big contrast with the Christian God, as Bradley sees it. He really emphasizes that this God of gods, as he calls him, is completely self-sufficient, needs nothing, zero dependence on humanity.
So all the rituals, the sacrifices, the offerings people might make.
In Bradley's view, none of that actually sustains God. It doesn't feed him or keep him going. His existence isn't reliant on anything we do or give.
That's a total flip from the ancient model, then.
A complete reversal.
But then Bradley doesn't just leave it at God doesn't need us.
Yeah.
He goes somewhere else with it.
Right. Because even though this God has no needs, Bradley argues, he actively cares for and protects humanity anyway.
That's where he brings in that analogy, the ants, right?
Yeah, the ant analogy.
Yeah.
He suggests we're like ants, but ants that God individually designed and knows intimately,
That's right.
despite God's immense power.
So it's not just a general vague awareness, but like specific knowledge of each one.
That's the idea. A detailed personal connection. We exist because he wants us to, Bradley writes, not because he needs us to.
Does using an ant analogy risk making humans seem insignificant, though, even with the personal knowledge part?
That's a fair question. I think Bradley's aim isn't really to diminish people, but more to emphasize the sheer scale difference, the magnitude of God's awareness.
Okay.
Like, if even beings that seem small to us are individually known by God, it highlights how personal his care is, even from that vast transcendent place. It's about God's desire for us to exist, not a divine deficiency he needs us to fill.
Right, desire versus need. That's a key distinction he's making.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this brings us to the heart of it, really. Maundy Thursday. Bradley calls what happens next an unprecedented act.
Something no lesser God would ever consider, he says.
And what is that act?
It's the core of Christian belief, really. This self-sufficient God choosing to become human.
Voluntarily taking on limitation.
Exactly. And Bradley highlights the specifics, doesn't he? Submitting to human flesh, being born not in a palace, but in a feeding trough.
To a refugee family, he points out, that's pretty humbling from the get-go.
It is. And it doesn't stop there. Bradley points to Jesus' life, specifically the act of washing his disciples' feet.
Which was a slave's job, basically, the lowest of the low.
Right. And then leading into the events of Maundy Thursday and Good Friday, the ultimate vulnerability.
Willingly being killed.
Murdered, Bradley says, by humanity. His own creation. The beings who exist because he wanted them to.
Wow. That whole trajectory from self-sufficiency to utter vulnerability and sacrifice, that's the stark opposition to those needy ancient gods he started with.
That's precisely the contrast he's drawing.
Yeah.
What do you think makes that willingness to be so vulnerable so, well, unique in his eyes?
I think it's that it wasn't required. It wasn't part of some cosmic bargain. It was a choice, a shocking choice from his perspective.
And then Bradley uses that beautiful line.
Yeah. God does not only speak poetry, he lives poetry.
What do you take that to mean in this context?
Well, I think he's saying it's not just about nice words or divine pronouncements. God's character, his love, his nature, it's demonstrated in action, in life lived.
So the incarnation, the foot washing, the suffering,
Yeah.
that is the poetry.
That's the lived poem, yeah. Especially starting with those acts of humility around Maundy Thursday. It's an embodiment of who this God is, not just a description. Actions speaking louder than words, literally.
It's powerful. And then he brings in that quote, the song lyrics.
From John Mark McMillan.
Right. Aphrodite would not weep, nor Zeus would suffer for the weak, but have you come to stand inside my pain?
That really cuts to the heart of it, doesn't it?
It totally encapsulates Bradley's point.
Uh-huh.
He contrasts the typical portrayal of, say, the Greek gods mentioned there, powerful, maybe capricious, but certainly not inclined to suffer with or for the weak.
With this image of the Christian God who enters into human suffering, stands inside the pain, as the lyric says.
Yeah, that solidarity, that empathy. Bradley argues that's what's radically different here. That line about suffering. It hits hard, doesn't it? Such a visceral contrast.
Definitely. So thinking about this whole reflection, for someone listening, what are the main things to pull out?
Well, I think that central contrast is huge, isn't it? A God who demands things because he needs them, versus a God who gives himself freely, sacrificially, purely out of love.
Yeah, it challenges basic assumptions about power and divinity, maybe. What does it mean to be God?
And it also really emphasizes the personal, intimate nature of this Christian God's care that Bradley describes.
Even with all that power and self-sufficiency.
Right. There's still this deliberate choice to connect with humanity very personally. That ant analogy comes back. Meticulous, intentional care for each individual because of desire, not need.
So ultimately, Bradley's piece pushes us to think about the radical implications of God becoming human, the incarnation.
And specifically, Jesus' actions on Maundy Thursday. The foot washing, the institution of the supper.
It wasn't just history, according to Bradley. It was a statement, a lived poem about God's very nature and his relationship with us.
Which leaves us with a pretty big question to ponder, doesn't it? For you, the listener. How does thinking about this contrast between, let's say, need-based divinity and love-based sacrificial divinity, how does that shift your perspective?
Fair faith, or something broader.
Maybe faith, sure. But maybe also how we view service or vulnerability, even just our relationships with each other.
What does it mean when the supreme power chooses weakness, chooses service?
Exactly. It's definitely something to chew on, thinking about the implications of a powerful being choosing not just to not need, but to actively give and serve, even to the point of suffering.
The gods of stone, the gods of fire, demanded smoke, required desire. We built their homes, we bore their weight. They gave us fear and called it fate. But you, oh Lord, you tore the sky. Stepped down to breathe, to bleed, to die. No golden throne could hold your grace. You wore the earth upon your face. You washed the feet of wayward men and kissed the dirt we trampled in. No God has stooped like you have done to call the slave a cherished son. The idols watched with hollow eyes as mothers wept and children died. But you, oh God, beyond compare, were born into our gasping air. No need of praise, no hunger fed, yet still you chose the crown of red. No golden throne could hold your grace. You wore the earth Damon AI. Damon AI.